The set went silent. John Wayne hung up the telephone and turned to the producers. What he said next was both a request and a command. And no one could say no. Monument Valley, Utah. March 1971. The red dust hung in the air like a curtain between earth and sky. The production of The Cowboys was in its fourth week, running on schedule, under budget, the kind of smooth operation studios dreamed about. John Wayne stood in his costume, worn leather, faded denim, the uniform of 1,000 westerns, waiting for the next setup. At 63, he moved slower than he once had. The cancer surgery 2 years earlier had taken something from him. Not his presence. Never that. But something beneath the surface. A knowledge of mortality that sat in his chest like a stone. The assistant director was blocking the scene when a production assistant approached, hesitant, carrying a telephone with a long extension cord snaking back toward the equipment truck. "Mr. Wayne, there's a call." They said it's urgent. Wayne looked at the phone. In 40 years of making pictures, urgent calls on set meant one thing: someone was hurt. Or worse. He took the receiver. Wayne. The voice on the other end belonged to a hospital administrator in Los Angeles. Professional. Careful. Delivering news that couldn't be softened no matter how gently it was said. There had been an accident. A young stuntman named Dale Robertson. Not the actor, a different Dale Robertson, 24 years old, new to the business, had been working on a picture at Universal. A fall during a horse stunt. The kind of fall that looked spectacular on film and killed you in real life. He was in critical condition. He probably wouldn't make it through the night. And before he lost consciousness, he'd asked for John Wayne. Wayne didn't know Dale Robertson. Had never worked with him. Had maybe shaken his hand once at a stunt coordinator's barbecue, the kind of thing you did in this business without remembering. But Dale Robertson knew John Wayne. Every young man trying to make it in westerns knew John Wayne. The one who'd done it right. The one who'd lasted. The one who represented something bigger than just movies. Wayne didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. Wayne stood holding the telephone, the desert wind pulling at his costume, the crew waiting 50 feet away for him to return to the shot. The sun beat down with that merciless Utah intensity that turned everything to bronze and shadow. "Which hospital?" Wayne asked. The administrator gave him the information. Cedars-Sinai. ICU. The family was there. They didn't know who John Wayne was or why their son had asked for him. They just knew it was the last thing he'd said before the morphine took him under. Wayne looked at his watch. It was 2:15 in the afternoon. Los Angeles was 8 hours away by car, longer by the time you navigated out of Monument Valley to somewhere with an actual airport. He hung up the telephone without saying goodbye and walked directly to the director, Mark Rydell, who was reviewing camera angles with the cinematographer. "Mark, I need to leave." Rydell looked up, confused. "Leave?" "We've got 3 more setups before we lose the light. I need to leave now. Tonight's work is cancelled. Duke, we're on a schedule. The studio is going to." "I don't care what the studio is going to do." Wayne's voice was quiet. Flat. The tone that anyone who knew him understood meant the discussion was over. "There's a boy dying in Los Angeles. He asked for me. I'm going." Rydell started to protest, then saw Wayne's face. Not angry. Not negotiating. Just absolute. "How long will you be gone?" "As long as it takes." Wayne walked to his trailer. He didn't change out of costume. There wasn't time. He grabbed his jacket, his wallet, his cigarettes. By the time he emerged, the first assistant director had already called the airport in Flagstaff. The production company kept a small plane there for emergencies. The drive to Flagstaff took 4 hours on roads that barely qualified as roads. Wayne sat in the back of the production truck, silent, smoking, watching the desert pass by in that eternal sunset that turns the whole world red. The crew wanted to ask questions. Nobody did. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. The plane landed at Burbank at 11:30 p.m. A studio car was waiting. Wayne still wore his Western costume under his jacket. He hadn't thought to change, hadn't cared. He looked like exactly what he was. A man who dropped everything to get here. Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The ICU was on the 4th floor. Visiting hours were long over, but when John Wayne walked through the doors, the night nurse took one look and simply pointed him down the hallway. The Robertson family sat in the waiting room. Mother, father, younger sister. They had the hollow-eyed look of people who'd been crying for hours and had run out of tears. Wayne stopped in the doorway. The father looked up, squinting, trying to place this tall man in the incongruous Western costume. "Mr. Robertson?" The man stood slowly. "Yes? I'm John Wayne. Your son asked to see me." The mother's hand went to her mouth. The sister started crying again, fresh tears after all. "I don't understand," the father said. "Dale never mentioned. Why would he?" "I don't know, sir. But I'm here if you'll allow me to see him." The mother stood. She was small, wrapped in a cardigan despite the warm night. "He's not conscious. The doctors said he won't wake up again." "I understand, ma'am. But I'd still like to sit with him a while. If that's all right." They led him to the room. Dale Robertson lay surrounded by machines that breathed for him, measured his failing heart, dripped morphine into his veins. He was young, impossibly young, the kind of young that made Wayne feel every one of his 63 years. Wayne pulled a chair beside the bed and sat down. The family hesitated in the doorway. "Take your time," Wayne said quietly. "Go get some coffee. I'll stay with him." They left. Wayne sat in the dim room, listening to the ventilator's rhythm, watching this boy he'd never really known fight a battle he was losing. On the bedside table was a well-worn paperback copy of The Shootist, the novel Wayne had been trying to get made into a film for 2 years. Someone had dogged page 73. Wayne picked it up, opened it to the marked page. It was the scene where the dying gunfighter tells the young boy about what matters in life. About doing your job right. About standing for something. He closed the book and set it down. "I don't know if you can hear me, son," Wayne said quietly. "But I'm here. You did good work. I heard about the fall. Heard you didn't hesitate, didn't complain, just did the stunt like you were asked. That's what we do in this business. We show up and do the work." The machines beeped. The ventilator hissed. "You asked for me, and I came. I want you to know that. Whatever happens tonight, you didn't die alone. And your family is going to remember that John Wayne sat with their boy. That means I'm going to remember you. Dale Robertson. Stuntman. 24 years old. Did his job." Wayne reached out and put his large, weathered hand over Dale's still one. They sat like that for 3 hours. Wayne didn't speak again. Didn't need to. Just sat in that hospital room, a man in a movie costume keeping vigil for a boy who'd never wake up. Dale Robertson died at 4:17 in the morning. His family was in the room when it happened. Wayne stood quietly in the corner, giving them space for their grief. When the nurses came to disconnect the machines, Wayne stepped into the hallway. The father followed him. "Mr. Wayne, I don't know how to thank you." "You don't thank me, sir. Your son was a professional. He earned respect. He worshipped you, you know. Had posters. Watched your films over and over. Wanted to work with you someday." Wayne's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry we didn't get the chance." The father held out his hand. Wayne shook it. "There's going to be a service. Friday. Would you? I mean, if you're able." "I'll be there," Wayne said. It wasn't a maybe. It was a fact. Away from the cameras, Wayne made a choice no one expected. Friday came. The funeral was in a small chapel in Burbank. Maybe 60 people, stunt coordinators, young actors, Dale's family and friends from before Hollywood. John Wayne arrived in a dark suit, not the costume this time. He sat in the back row. When the time came for people to speak, The pastor asked if anyone wanted to share memories. The room was quiet. Most of these people barely knew Dale. He'd only been in the business for 2 years. What was there to say? Wayne stood up. He walked to the front slowly, his limp more pronounced than usual, the hip that had been hurting for months, the body starting to betray him in small ways. I didn't know Dale Robertson well, Wayne began, his voice carrying that distinctive cadence that had filled theaters for 4 decades. Met him maybe once in passing. But I knew what he represented. He was every young man who comes to this town with a dream and the guts to chase it. He paused, looking at the closed casket. Dale asked to see me when he was dying. I've thought a lot about why. I think it's because he wanted to believe the movies meant something. That the work we do, the stories we tell, they stand for something real. Honor. Courage. Doing your job no matter the cost. Wayne reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out something small, a silver belt buckle, the kind stunt riders wore, the kind Wayne had worn in 100 westerns. He'd won it in 1949 for a riding competition. He'd kept it ever since. I'm leaving this with Dale, Wayne said, setting it on the casket. Because he earned it. He showed up. He did the work. And he didn't quit even when it cost him everything. The room was silent except for quiet crying. We tell stories about heroes, Wayne continued. Cowboys who face down danger, who stand alone, who do what's right even when it's hard. Dale lived that. Not in a movie. In real life. And that makes him more of a hero than any character I've ever played. Wayne returned to his seat. The service continued, but nobody really heard it. They were all thinking about what Wayne had said. About this young man who died doing a job most people never even thought about. After the service, Wayne stood outside the chapel, smoking, watching people leave. Dale's mother approached him, clutching a handkerchief. Mr. Wayne, I wanted you to have something. She held out the dogged paperback of The Shouldest. Dale was reading this. He told me it was going to be your next picture. He said if he could do stunt work on it, his career would be complete. Wayne took the book. His throat was tight. Ma'am, if I make this picture, I'm going to dedicate it to your son. That's a promise. She nodded, unable to speak, and walked away. But what followed would stay with everyone who witnessed it, forever. Wayne returned to Monument Valley 2 days later. The production had lost a week of shooting. The studio was furious. The overages were mounting. Insurance was involved. Lawyers were making calls. Wayne didn't care. On his first day back, he gathered the entire cast and crew before shooting began. 200 people on a western set in the middle of Utah nowhere. Some of you heard about the stuntman who died last week, Wayne said, standing on a camera platform so everyone could see him. Dale Robertson. 24 years old. I want to take a moment for him. The desert went quiet. This business takes people from us. It's dangerous work. We all know that. But we forget it because we're making entertainment. We're telling stories. Sometimes we forget that the stories are real for the people living them. Wayne pulled out the paperback of The Shouldest. This is a book about a dying gunfighter. It's about facing your end with dignity. About living by a code even when nobody's watching. Dale was reading this when he died. And it made me realize something. Wayne held up the book so everyone could see it. If I make this picture, it's going to be for him. For every stuntman, every crew member, every person who shows up and does honest work that nobody remembers. That's the real West. Not the one we put on film. The one where people keep their word. He closed the book. Let's make something worth his sacrifice. Let's do our jobs. They shot the scene in one take. Nobody spoke afterward. They just worked. Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. 5 years later, John Wayne made The Shouldest. His final film. The story of a dying gunfighter facing his end with dignity. In the credits, a single line. For Dale Robertson, who showed up. Wayne died 3 years after that. The belt buckle he'd left on Dale's casket was buried with the young stuntman. But the book, the worn paperback of The Shootist, Wayne kept until his own final day. It sat on his bedside table. Page 73 still dog-eared. A reminder that the real heroes don't get remembered in movies. They get remembered by the people who witnessed their quiet courage.